Okay, ready to let everyone in?
Yep.
Hello, welcome
Ooh,
everyone.
Farida. Hi, Sarah.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome, welcome.
Hello, Farida. All the way from India. And Kanchan, too. Oof.
Wonderful, welcome. Welcome so much, everyone. It's so lovely to see all your beautiful faces. Hello. Thank you so much for joining us as we talk about navigating power struggles today, a topic that I know is universal in the world. So I think it's something we can all benefit from. And so I just want to remind everyone that really we are here having this conversation because to us at Expanding You, community is everything. We really believe that expanding our courage, our love, and our joy is what has the power to change our world. And real change thrives in the strength of community. So we are really committed to building that community through learning and growing together. And so thank you so much for being here. I'm Leslie Brown. I will be serving as host / mediator. So at any point, if you have questions, comments, of course, you're always welcome to share in the main group, and you're also welcome to use the chat. I will be specifically monitoring that. So I encourage you to drop your comments there, including right now. Why don't you let us know where you're joining from? And if you were with us for our last conversation where we were talking about self-esteem, then I would love to know if there's any big ahas or takeaways that you had from that session. Love for you to drop that in the chat as well. And, you know, today as we talk about power struggles, always in these community conversations, we want our table talk to reflect what you most want to learn and know about. So please don't hesitate to let us know. I'm really excited for this part of the topic, or I'm hoping you talk about this element, and we'll always do our best to make sure that we honor and incorporate all of that. And one last piece that I want to say before I pass the mic over to Lynn and Jeff, I just want to let everyone know that we have big news, and that is that we have a launch coming up. We have a launch of Inner Balance 2.0. Thank you very much. New, improved. We've really taken this program up a notch, including we've actually developed a VIP package for which there is only going to be 10 seats available. It's going to include some really exciting extras, including some one-on-one coaching time. So if you are interested in the VIP package and one of those highly sought after 10 seats, then please drop a VIP in the chat and I'll make sure that we send off more information to you. But I don't want to talk anymore about anything like that. I want to talk more about power struggles in relationships. So I am so thrilled to pass the mic over to Lynn Samita and Jeff Brown, our founders. So welcome over to you two. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Leslie. This is a juicy topic, isn't it?
Definitely.
It sure is.
Lynn, if you want to kick it off first, and then I'll go to the 5 stages second.
Sure.
Okay.
You know, it's interesting. I want to really kind of ride on Leslie's coattails of what she just said. And I was listening to a podcast about how challenging our world is these days, that it's like everything is supersized, dramas, wars, environment challenges. I mean, political issues and so on. And the inclination is to want to pull back and withdraw. But at the very same time, we're yearning for meaningful connections and conversations. So this is what we're really excited about in terms of today. So that's my little extra piece of what I want.
And my share is when we get into this power struggle and how it looks. Say, definitely none of us are coming in as experts here. This has been a big area of my own journey in my own life, spending many years as a people pleaser. So I will share some of the stages from Lynn. Who's the name of the lady who created these stages? Susan
Campbell.
Campbell, the 5
She wrote-
stages.
Yeah, she wrote the book, The Couple's Journey, a long time ago, but I have found it to be just foundational in my picture of how relationships evolve, all kinds of relationships.
So here is Susan's 5 stages. The romance stage, of course, this is when we're looking for same, and similarities, how we fit together well. This is my favorite stage. Anyone else? Anyone else like this stage? Yeah. So infatuation and all of that fun stuff.
Progress.
Oh, somebody is
Oops.
echoing.
Got it.
And then the power struggle stage, where we start to like show some of the things maybe we hadn't shown in the romance stage, to declare some differences, and the conflict starts. Then we go to the stability. We start to accept the differences, understand each other more, and we move into this next level of commitment and building future together. And then the co-creation. How do we work and grow as a couple? Now, this can sound like only in romantic or significant other relationships, but the truth is, this has been the same for all my friendships. This has been the same for all relationships I have in my life that have been around a long time. These stages I've worked through them. We have worked through them, and we bounce around within them. As we evolve over time. We can fall back to a power struggle in a moment or something. I originally, when I thought these could have been like, once we're past the romance stage, we never go back. But of course, that's ridiculous. When you're in co-creation, the couples that I know who are really great at co-creation do tons of romance. So there's balancing all these pieces. And today we're going to dive into the very difficult one that kind of ends relationships, the power struggle one. If we don't learn how to manage that well and find our strength in it, then the relationship can usually end at that point. So I'll pass it back over to Lynn.
When I first learned about this, I was a school counselor. And so obviously romances are very popular in high school. And I started to notice this huge pattern of romance, power struggle, start over. Oh, this is clearly not the right girl, boy for me. Romance, power struggle, start over. And so the whole thing was predicated on, there is this perfect person that I won't have to have a power struggle with, because power struggle says there's something wrong. And Susan Campbell's work was so powerful for me to see, no. Your idea about power struggle is really missing the point. And obviously that's revealing a little of my own history around how I perceived power struggles and so on. Anyway, I was teaching this, and there was just this fabulous example that came up. And so there's a colleague of mine, her name is Perry, and her husband's Fred. Anyway, long story short, they're both brilliant people. Perry worked for Sesame Street and very creative, and Fred's an artist and this fabulous, gentle soul. So I've laid out these stages of relationship, and Perry, who is from New York, shoots up her hand and says, I have an example. And so from the back of the room, in this very loud New York voice, she says, Fred and I have been together for 5 years. We moved from wherever they were to a new location and a new home. And it was Saturday night when they got all into their new place, but just boxes everywhere. And she turns to Fred and says, oh, Saturday night, Fred, Indian food. And Fred goes, I hate Indian food. And she says, Fred, we've had Indian food every Saturday night for 5 years. You love Indian food. And Fred, this very gentle man, says, no, I don't. And it was just like right in that moment, out of romance into how are we actually different? What is our real uniqueness? And so this was very powerful for me to see that in romance, a few things are missing. So we're calling it the relationship equations. In the romance stage, it's half of me, the half I think you're going to like, and half of the other person shows up. And together, these two halves make a one, make us, make the relationship. Does that resonate for anyone? Do you know that stage of, I said to my husband, I love pizza. He said, oh, I love pizza. Only later did we discover he didn't like anything about the kind of pizza I liked. So very interesting. And in power struggle, we start to rebalance it. So instead of all the parts I think you'll like, I start to show how I'm different. And so now we've got the half versus the half. Now we're not teaming up, it's the battle. And that's what is the relationship at that stage. And so we're going to dig into this a little bit more about really, if we won't do anything but romance, then all you've got is half and half. If you get stuck in power struggle, you've got all of that conflict and opposition, and you start to lose sight of even the good stuff you loved, and so on and so forth. So that's where we're starting.
So that brings us to why is power struggle so difficult? And power struggle contains conflict. And how many people here absolutely love conflict? Oh yeah, okay. That's right. Most people are afraid of conflict, don't like conflict, have been raised to avoid conflict at all costs. And so that's why the power struggle can be very difficult. And again, as I was saying before, as myself as a longtime pleaser, until I got into personal development, basically when it came to power struggles for me, it was avoid, 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 and then put on the armor, get all my ammunition ready for war, because we're gonna have a conflict, and that's how I grew up with it. So of course that never turns out very well. And I actually have an experience when I was early in personal development where I was doing a group program over a number of weeks, and we'd meet every week and kind of work on our goals, and then we'd support each other. And I really struggled with this one person in the group who was quite dominant, and they would kind of control things a lot. And basically, eventually I was getting, I was building up feeling unheard and unseen, and building up resentment. And, and at some point I was like enough, and then, so I set it up, got myself organized to have this conversation with her. It was my first time actually finding healthy power struggle. And well, it didn't turn out very healthy. I did kind of a really rough, messy job of speaking up. And I can tell you, I still remember my adrenaline was pumping like I was going to be in a fist fight or something. My adrenaline was like up in my throat. And I'm just basically saying a few things of, I'm not happy how this plays out. These behaviors don't work for me. And I remember saying, this is not a discussion. I don't want to hear any feedback. I just want to say this stuff and I'm done, and I'm sharing this with you because when we first take a step out of doing something or into doing something new, a lot of times it's messy, and it's that fear that was stopping me from speaking up already, knowing it was probably going to be messy, that stopped me. And it was a really powerful experience for me to actually lean into. And, I reflected, we met again next week. So the next week we met, I had reflected on my behavior and apologized, but still stayed with, hey, there is some challenges, and I did not handle that well. And so that was the beginning of me learning how to find healthy balance, power struggle, and not do my old ways. As Lynn and I have been sharing about power struggle or conflict in relationships, what's been happening for you? Do any of you have a relationship that's popped up in your mind, or a relationship in your life where there's some power struggle or conflict happening? Raise your hand if you have one in mind. Anyone have one in mind? Yeah, you got something? We're going to go to a experiential kind of exercise. So I'd like you to think of someone in your life or a situation in your life where there's some power struggle.
And don't worry, we're not going to make you tell us all about it.
Right. Yeah.
And you could go back to a time where you felt it was a power struggle, and maybe you felt you didn't actually know what was the best thing to do, or you did whatever you did, and maybe felt it didn't actually come off the drawing board. Yeah, so it's helpful to think of specifics when you're learning ideas, not to just have them free floating in. Yeah, so thank you, Susan. That's great. I can only imagine. A colleague of mine has twins, and she said, if you really want to accelerate the learning curve, have two at once. Like it's because one is doing, the other isn't, and then the other will be learning what the first one did. So now you get double the trouble, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so thinking of this context of where would you say you had some power struggle? What is it that makes power struggle so difficult? Just think about that for a moment and pop in the chat any thought ideas that come to mind. Yeah.
Hanson's talking about power struggle with my new early adults who've left home for studies in the US. So I can only imagine the distance being added to the equation, right? Sarah's mentioning two people just wanting two different things, right? What a classic example, right? How if I want this and you want that, how are we going to navigate it? And Susan specifically mentioning that perhaps it's your twins who are strong-willed, Susan. Do they come like that naturally, I wonder? And Colleen is mentioning emotions as well. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the emotions can run high. We get pretty charged. That's a great point, Colleen.
And you know, what's really beautiful about that is it takes it out of thinking power struggle only happens in romantic relationships or whatever. We know the power struggle, for example, of the wonderful, terrible twos. You know, when the child suddenly figures out they can say no, and they can say mine, and they get the elbows out and all of that. And so it shows up there, it shows up in workplaces. Oh my gosh. I mean, I know Sherry, and you've seen loads of work contexts, right? Where it's been overt power struggle or covert. Yeah. Oh, Farida, you got your hand up.
I have a power struggle with my son. He's 57 and I'm 80, and I believe I know it all. He believes he knows it all. There's never a time we've ever come to a negotiation where we agreed on something. Okay? And he's in a different field, I'm in a different field. So he looks at the world in a different way, and so do I. And every time he says, you know, Mom, I'm only doing this for you. And I say, oh, my horns come out. And it's not that I want to, but I'm motivated to. Okay? Just because I want to be better than what he thinks I am. Okay.
Thank you.
And it goes on and on. It's healthy, I believe.
Well, there's some factors that are coming into play. Sorry, Leslie, I don't mean to step on your toes, but we're going to talk about some different elements that come into play. But I just had to chuckle, Farida, from what you said. And then I glanced over and read Susan's. When you have strong, opinionated friendships or relationships,
yes,
Farida and her son both think they know best.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd like to share into this too, because this has been a big journey in my own life. So relationship with our family members, of course, is one of the most difficult places. We have the strongest conditioning or programming there. And we're, Marshall Rosenberg uses this idea of enemy image. Basically, we create images of them. We hold on to how we've seen them in the past. And then we, in that moment, we're not present with them. We're seeing them through all these filters, whether we're conscious of it or not. And I'm very honored to say that I've done amazing work with my mom on this and with both my parents. Dad has passed now, but for me to be able to use the work that we're going to talk about here and the work that we do at Expanding You to create a close, loving relationship with him, even though he didn't change and he stayed prickly, you know, I was still able to be loving and understanding. And Mom has been on the journey with me, learning and growing together. So we've had a lot of power struggle together and difference of opinions and clashing. And we're really getting to a point where we have wonderful conversations now where we can say what's going on inside ourselves, take ownership of our behavior, and then find that meet in the middle where our values overlap and where we're saying, okay, well, you can agree to that, I can agree to this. And what's important is we can both be connected, have difference of opinion, and the relationship is not on the line. It's not a personal thing. and we can see the value in each other's position. So I love that this work brings us there.
When Jeff was sharing that story with me, or just appreciating his mom and so on, I said, Jeff, you actually are co-creating a new relationship. You see, and that's part of the key. Jeff, I think you've stepped out of son and she stepped out of mothering. And so you've let the two roles go and you're now meeting as really genuine learners. People just want to learn and grow together as equals. And that is the most exciting, delicious place. There is hope, Susan. When you get to this stage, it will take a little while for little ones, but there's a place, if we're willing and aware, that we want to transition out of the roles of parent-child and let go of those expectations and come together in that place now of co-creating something brand new. And it actually starts all over again, in a sense, almost like the romance. There's a yumminess, there's a newness, there's an excitement, because we are seeing each other differently. And that can happen multiple times through relationships.
Excellent, Lynn. Well, I'd like us to now switch to the activity. I'm going to pose some questions for each of you to think about and respond in the chat. So if you think of a scenario where you've had some power struggle, what did you do instead of conflict?
Mm-hmm.
Think about that for a moment and then please put it in the chat.
And this can be in a specific situation that you were thinking of, but you might actually, like myself, notice a big pattern. I pretty consistently do certain things.
Yeah, I wrote it in the chat. My tendency, like 99.9% of the time, is to withdraw.
Yeah.
Right. If conflict approaches, I pull back. I pull into myself. I pull away. When it comes to my partner, I tend to even get, if the conflict is that I'm upset about something, I tend to even avoid him, and he knows it. I make sure he knows it.
Yeah, we call it the ice age has suddenly descended.
I remember I was married very early. I was married in my 20s, and we got together at age 18 and 20 and had a child. So very unequipped.
Oh, by the way, Jeff, that's the compressing of the stages. Romance, get together, skip power struggle, get to commitment, and have a baby.
Right.
All in the space of how long?
A year, less than a year.
Yeah, in less than a year, we did all the stages of a relationship.
Well, let me tell you, the power struggle doesn't get skipped. So
Okay.
we had a lot of difficulties, but I'm sharing this with you because looking at how I handled conflict then was I literally would do everything to avoid. I tried agreeing with her, and then that upset her because now I was like, she thinks I'm placating or something. I tried to not say anything, and I would try to just roll myself on a blanket and lay on the couch, like anything to avoid the conflict. I mean, I just didn't have any skills. And so yeah, the fear of argument or where it might go was just too much. And unfortunately, that always made it worse. Because I'm creating more and more disconnection, which is the thing she's trying to get with the conversation. I just didn't understand back then. So I know how very much it's like to withdraw.
And so I'm just noticing Susan saying that Colleen says that she tends to also become quiet and withdrawn. Susan saying she asks clarifying questions and then the we get loud to be heard, which is an interesting progression. I think you're probably not alone on that one. And Kenshin's sharing that she'll start with agreement and then put forth her point of view. So sort of like, it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, Kenshin, it sounds like, okay, let me kind of give you what you want here, and then I'll tell you how I'm really feeling.
Nice.
Yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself, Kenshin. Go ahead and share.
And then I get it all done my way. So it calms the person down, and then you can't hear me?
No, you're good.
Yeah. So then I get it my way, and this I do especially with my father because
Mhm.
he stands out his points. I said, okay, I agree with you. Whatever you're saying, I agree with you. But however, listen to me too. And then I see to it that I get my way through, him that, okay, let's do this. So that's easier than, just staying out with my point and he not listening to it and I not listening. So there's constantly a struggle with sharing our views. So this has made life a little more easier than before.
Yeah, a very sophisticated way. I wish I had that in my 20s. Okay.
And I'm loving Frida, I love what you're sharing here, right? She'll talk about it after blowing up and then talking with herself thinking, why am I arguing here? This is someone that I love and that I'm so proud of, right? It's so true. Oftentimes that's what happens. We go into that reactive place and then retroactively we're thinking, oh, how did I even get there? Right? Which is usually a good indication of a lot that's been sort of suppressed or is building up over time and it had the opportunity to release itself.
That's, Leslie, why I love that equation. Half of me, they're seeing part of me, but I'm not feeling fully seen or heard, or the spaciousness. Like, my son asked me, how are you, Mom? And he's expecting a one-word answer kind of thing. Like, that's not giving me the space to really share what I might like to share. So I love that equation of, am I feeling like only part of me is getting seen? And if I'm thinking that, then the guess is, so is the other person on the other side.
Well, and I noticed Cherie is
Oh.
already leading us into our next question because Cherie's noticing that, she would sort of back off and then build up a bit of resentment, right? I mean, how many of us can relate to that? The resentment that builds up when, like Lynn's sharing, we only allow part of ourselves to be seen. Inevitably, the parts that we're hiding aren't happy about being hidden.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we're going to point to that next. We're going to that next. I just see Sarah also mentioned that she has a reaction and then she pulls back to think about it. And
Yeah.
so say, for example, in your situation, Sarah, or for any of the rest of you, when you show up with that initial way of avoiding conflict, what are the costs that creates? And that will be your next question to think about and put in chat. What are the costs associated with the way you behave to avoid conflict?
Mm-hmm.
And this could be personal costs to you, or of course, costs to the relationship.
I really love this question because so often in our defense of ourselves, because we are trying to get something, we are blind to the full cost. And maybe in hindsight or thinking it over, but the more we can bring awareness to the costs, the more it can help us shift and do something different.
I'd love to hear some of your answers in the
Yeah,
chat.
I want to hear them too. What do you do? What are the costs?
So Colleen takes a personal hit big time.
Yeah.
So she's feeling sad and belittling herself, right? And I can so relate to that, Colleen, right? That's where I start to bust out the big stick. Why did I avoid that? Or why did I make that choice? Why did I behave that way? That's not how I want to show up. Great awareness. And Susan's, resentment, anger, broken relationships, self-doubt. Kathy's naming the wall that comes in between she and the other person. Absolutely. There's big costs. I know for myself with the withdrawal, the energy in the home, the environment, it's not positive for anyone. The two of us in the power struggle, or the kids, or the cats, or the guests, or the neighbors, right? It doesn't feel good for anyone. Yeah, Susan's naming tension, more avoidance from Farida. Yeah, lots of costs.
Well, and last week we talked about the self-esteem, and this is exactly a scenario where self-esteem gets hammered as you give away your power by either being reactive or being withdrawn and feeling like you're powerless and can't say anything, and you go into self-doubt or guilt. any of these sort of things that really bring your self-esteem down.
Well, and I think many people here, like we're of an age where I think most of us might say we should know better. So for me, the big thing is disappointment. I'm like, oh my God, like, how is it at 73 I'm still learning this piece? Like, you know, it's just that difference between how I want to show up and how I'm actually showing up. And the scales are not balanced, which, as you say, Jeff, then that affects the self-esteem. And then we're on slippery slope for other behaviors that reflect low self-esteem. The other thing I was going to say, it's so interesting, is I worked with a policeman, and you know what he did to, like, he would avoid, but what he did is polish his boots. He said, you could look in my closet, they are gleaming, because this is how he handled his frustration, is just, I'm going to do something I know how to do, and they are polished within an inch of their life.
So let's switch then to, why is power struggle important, and what are the gifts that the power struggles bring us? As Lynn showed in the equation, start off in the romance with only showing half of us and withholding a lot of information that we think won't be liked or accepted. And then the power struggle brings in the other half. We start to show, well, I actually struggle with this, or whatever, the power, bring our opinions that start to come in. And so with the power struggle, we get to actually know the whole person, see the whole person. And of course, the person themselves, as we lean into being able to speak up, we create more safety and trust in the relationship. We don't think like we're on pins and needles and we can't speak up, because we haven't entered that power struggle yet. And the power struggle brings that phase of the relationship where we can really go deeper. And this is where authenticity starts to come in, because the first romance can be very much fantasy, and the power struggle brings in the authenticity. So it's a really important stage, and one that we want to be really good at engaging with in a healthy way.
Well, and I can give an example in a business context. I partnered with two other men, and together we built a company. And so, of course, we're in the romance stage of what the company could be, and choosing the name and choosing the logo and la, la, la. And we designated the different roles that we were going to each have. And this one partner said, now I just want to be open and transparent. I have an issue with trust. Oh, okay. And he said, and the way that I've learned to trust is people do what they say and say what they mean and so on, which I thought made perfect sense. So we proceed to start doing things, and the other partner, he and I were the trainers. So we're putting materials out and getting things together for facilitators and whatnot. And we sent the other partner a document. What do you think of this? Any edits or changes? He was delighted. He gave us feedback and so on, because we'd said we would check in with each other. Anyway, he gave us the feedback. We incorporated it and sent the document out. And he lost it. His picture was we would come back again to him and check, etc. And keep in mind, these are myself and this other colleague. We are 50 plus years old, traveling internationally, training all around the world. And we're going, we have to get our letter approved. Like now it's not a consideration or respect, it's a rule. What I'm telling you is we skipped over the power struggle stage. We went from romance of what we could create right into commitment of building a company and hit the wall. And that was a very, very painful lesson, because we didn't actually do the stages that we needed to build up, making it through those power struggle conversations and those tussles and so on, and really actually knowing each other. When he said, I have an issue with trust, I knew what those words meant, but I didn't know what it would be like to live with somebody. I mean, work with somebody that had a really big issue with trust. So when we skip, we're missing the gifts of power struggle, as Jeff is saying.
Yeah, so true, Lynn. And for those of you that were at last week's session, the exercise we worked on showed how you have experiences, and you can find on the shadow side of your experience, you'll find your greatest strengths and your greatest wisdom. And so I would link that over here as well. In the power struggle, it's in our difficult moments that we find our greatest strength and our greatest wisdom. So it's another important piece of the power struggle. Be seen, heard, and build our strength.
How many people here would say you've grown more from your struggles or your difficult situations than from your successes?
Yeah.
Hands down.
Yeah, hands down for sure. Okay, we're gonna go to the next question. So, looking back at the situation, what do you really want? What is most important in this situation with this person you're thinking of? And take a moment to think about that. And I'm looking for you to kind of tap into your values here. And then once you have an answer, we'd love to see some in the chat.
I know this question is so valuable for me because inevitably when I'm caught in conflict or power struggle, I'm usually not clear on what I really want. I understand something isn't the way I want it,
Right.
but I don't know what I actually want. Right. And
And
Kathy's
that's-
naming connection is the thing that she wants. Yeah. I
Yeah.
hear that, Kathy.
We can blind ourselves to the data or our interpretations and forget things like the most important thing is connection here.
Mhm.
How am I doing on that?
Mm.
What I'm avoiding.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mm.
great.
Tension wants to be heard. Susan just doesn't want to fight or argue. And Sarah thinks she ultimately just wants to feel heard and understood and respected. Right.
Nice.
And Frida to feel reconnected.
And the problem with Susan with the not to fight or argue is that's what you don't want. Like, so then that's sort of like what we call the halfway point. Okay, I know what I don't want, but getting over to the side of what I really do want that Leslie's pointing to is often the trickier bit, because when we're charged, elevated, all the whatever the fight flight hormones are running through our system, it's hard to pull back and go, okay, what really matters here? Yeah.
And can I just add, like, sometimes you just do just to be heard, or you just don't want to argue anymore, so you walk away.
Yeah.
And then you just start this vicious cycle of anger and blah blah blah. Now it all stews, and it just
Yeah. And it's round and round the merry-go-round, isn't it? From withdrawing to stepping in. Yeah, the whole cycle. Sounds just delightful, doesn't it?
Fun.
And we've all been there, in my opinion.
Mhm. And Cherie's sharing, what she's looking for is consensus, to have that open discussion and for the other person to understand how important her view is to her versus just their view, right? I mean, how many of you can relate to that, where you're trying to express your point of view and the other person is so committed to theirs that they're not even listening to hear or understand what you're trying to say, regardless of whether they agree or not.
Yeah.
Leslie, I mean, that's 100% accurate. And then there's also the other side. And I'm married to a wonderful guy who is super independent, and so am I. So we do power struggle a lot. And sometimes I'll say to him, how big of a deal is this to you? And he'll go, it's huge. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, I don't really care what we have for dinner. So but it turns into a power struggle. And then I realize it wasn't very important to me and very important to him.
Right.
So there's that side too.
And that's, again, understanding each other, isn't it? How is it something that seems so minor to one can seem so huge to the other?
And I look at him and go, why are you so mad right now?
And then what's wrong with you, right? The thought, not necessarily said out loud.
Yeah.
And then to hear them saying, I'm not mad at you, it's about something else.
Mm.
Then it goes on. So tell me what you're mad about, and it goes on and on.
The escape I'm not mad at you, it's something else. So look at the answers you've just shared here, come up with, to be heard, to be connected, to be reconnected, to accept, and see those answers for a moment, and then reflect back to how you avoided conflict. And will that behavior of how you avoided conflict ever bring you the thing you want? And the point of this is for you to be able to just be able to see, I'm showing up this way pretty habitually through my programming and by avoiding or reactive, stepping into seeing some of the costs so we can soften, like, I don't know that that behavior is very helpful. Don't want that so much. Realizing power struggle has enormous benefit, and then getting deeper into the values of what you really want. So then you can use all that information to shift. Next time you go for a conversation in that relationship, remember, it's connection, it's acceptance, it's all these other pieces is what I'm really looking for. And when that part of your old program arises that wants to withdraw or react, you can pause for a moment, remember what you really want, what matters most, and then you will show up differently from that space.
Well, and I think, Jeff, for me, it's even, I'm back at the stage of shifting my beliefs around power struggle or conflict, because I was raised very traditionally in the sense of English and Japanese, English mom, Japanese father. Young ladies were to present in a very specific way, not aggressive, not opinionated, not strong-willed, etc., etc. So very, very much a model of be compliant. So I am raised in that environment, but I'm this very talkative, outgoing little girl who doesn't seem to know how to not talk or be quiet, etc. And like, so it was that internal struggle from very early. And then I noticed in high school, I did get quiet. It wasn't the healthy kind of quiet. It was, I am feeling so insecure and uncertain, I'm quiet. I am not going to say anything that's going to make me look like I don't fit. And so then I went through that whole phase. And I remember saying to my mom one day about how things were going. And I said, well, it's really, really hard. And she said, it is? And I said, well, I'm shy. I mean, Mom, it's just really hard when you're shy. And she burst out laughing. And she said, you're shy? And I said, I am. And she said, at 2, you were inviting the neighborhood to your backyard. You introduced a couple to Dad and I and said, oh, I think you guys will be friends. Like, where is this shyness coming from? Well, it was acquired behavior to at least not get hurt more or feel more different. And so when you have those beliefs that, you know, this is the way you should be, or this is what conflict means, there's quite a bit of work to do to change those beliefs, which I know we agreed we wouldn't get into today, but I'm wanting to acknowledge some of us have beliefs and we're in that journey of updating those beliefs. Can I get to that place that power struggles are really healthy? Power struggles are essential, etc., etc. Yeah, thank you.
Leads us right into this very well. Adam Grant's, the goal is not to avoid conflict, it's to have the right kind of conflict. And, I think for me, and when I listen to his work, having that space of returning to what I want, what's most important, and then being able to have the conversations that might be difficult, where we might, in his terms, he talks about task conflicts versus relationship conflict. And for me, just keeping focused on, we can disagree on a task, but the relationship's not on the line because we disagree on the task. So notice of that old part, a little child part of me wants to think, oh, the relationship's in trouble. It's not. We just don't agree on a certain topic or a solution or an idea. But it's got nothing to do with the relationship. And Lynn, I'd love you to share just a little piece of this before we open up to everyone for questions about the co-creation of the final stage of relationship.
Well, if we loop back to this mathematical equation of relationships, so we get out of the half person and half person becoming one in the romance, and we get out of power struggle of being in opposition. The real beauty, The third stage is stability, where we catch our breath. And then we recommit, in a sense, to who we're actually working with, living with, being a friend with. And co-creation means whole person and relation, and what the creativity is that you want to do together equals the whole relationship. So we're not trying to make half plus half equals 1. We're going to a much expanded mathematical conclusion of 1 + 1 + 1 equals this wonderful relationship that can co-create, be it just a great parent-child relationship, partner, business partner, etc. Yeah. So we're very committed to that in our work in expanding you. How do I become that really whole person I want to be? And how do I show up as that whole person?
Which includes, in our work, we showed the identity continuum before, which includes the constructed identity. That's part of the journey.
Mhm.
A tendency to want to wrong that part of ourselves or wrong it in others. And now you're back into half person, half person.
That's right. I will hide my bad parts.
Yeah, that's right. So I'd love to open up to the group. I'd love to hear any questions or insights or any shares. I'll kind of pass this over to Leslie.
Mhm. What's popping in your brains, or
As we're waiting, I'll just tell you one analogy that keeps popping up as we're talking about conflict and power struggle is, think of a gem, think of a diamond in your engagement ring, or beautiful cabochon and necklace. That beautiful stone looked like a rock at some point. And the only reason we consider it beautiful is because it's been cut and experienced abrasion and friction and gone through all kinds of turmoil to become this beautiful thing. And I think our relationships are very much the same, right? Something that feels uncomfortable, but when we go through the discomfort, when we commit to the friction and finding our way through it, the result is something beautiful that we can treasure, right?
Well said, Leslie.
oh, Leslie,
I
you
think
reminded me of one thing I wanted to share with the group. I just heard a woman say, they were talking about relationships, and she said, oh yeah, AI. And the commentator said, AI? Like the AI technology? And she said, oh, no. It's the other AI. And the woman was like, pardon me? Artificial intimacy.
Mhm.
How much are we doing artificial intimacy? I know you, I already know you, you don't even need to speak, I know you. Like, that's not genuine intimacy. So anyway, I just thought that was so creative.
I think
Farida,
for
you
me,
had something to share.
I think if there was no conflict in a relationship, it would be so boring,
Agreed.
wouldn't it?
yeah.
I mean, that, as I would say, those aggressive moments and then getting back together is more interesting.
Oh,
So,
for Rita.
that part of it is so beautiful, where we agree to have been wrong, okay? And then, as you say, the yummy romance comes back into scene again, right? But when you really think of it, it's good to have these power struggles. It keeps us going. We're always looking forward to the next day, all right? And when it's a repetition, you've actually learned from the last one. So you avoid saying what you did the last time. This is a great topic you brought up.
Nice, Kanchan.
I also, Frida, I also think for myself, and I look at reflecting on my relationships over time, it's the differences in people where I've leaned in and then wound up learning from their perspective or learning how they do something differently that I didn't do that way. And of course, it's helped me again grow and evolve, or also understand them better and become closer with them. So there's some real juiciness in it for sure. And that creates really long lasting relationships.
Absolutely.
Leslie?
I was just going to say, I have to say, well, and Susan was just sort of agreeing with what Farida was saying in terms of those reconnections being extremely fulfilling. And I want to circle back to what Cherie shared about, that conversation where how important is this to you? I
Mhm.
think that's a perfect example of the value of the power struggle and the conflict I might think this is a ridiculous topic. Why are we even having a conversation, let alone conflict over this? Only to discover it's something that, the other person is passionate about. It really matters to them. That right there is a key piece of learning in terms of creating a really healthy relationship. I really love that. Thanks for
Mhm.
that, Sherry.
True.
Mhm.
A couple I've studied with, they have said they've been married 14 times. And when I first heard this, I thought they meant to different people. No, no, no. They have literally officially recognized this stage is done. We can't do relationship this way anymore. And they recommitted, co-created a different relationship. And she said, just because we're doing this workshop for couples, et cetera, don't think we have it mastered. And she shared this heartbreaking story of them having a battle in the living room and it being quite antagonistic. And their dog walked through between them and fell over and had a heart attack. And she literally felt that dog was trying to soothe things, walked in between and just collapsed under the antagonism that was in the room. He lived, fortunately, and so on, but like
The energy was so strong.
it was so strong, and she was appalled that that's the kind of intensity that they had allowed to build up, even while doing counseling for couples.
Right.
So there's nobody that gets off here as perfect people or whatever.
I would like to invite everybody to take off your mute and just share what's the biggest takeaway for you
Yeah.
around today's topic, or what stood out for you, or what did you resonate with? I'd love to hear your voices.
Mhm.
I go back to what Sherry said and how important is this to you? And I think that knowing how important it is to the other person and it's nowhere near as important it is to me, like on a scale,
Mhm.
will probably diminish some of the conflict in some situations, not all, but in some. I love that. So thank you.
Mhm.
It gives you a chance to switch in your mind and go, oh,
Uh-huh.
And
wow, this is really important to you. Well, okay, then I'm ready to lean in. I was holding it as very small. I
Yeah.
couldn't make sense of the behavior. It's really a good self-reflection.
Yeah,
And I
and
think especially I want to underline, Susan, with children, because because as an adult, a child problem doesn't seem like a big deal. But when you ask them how they feel and view it, whoa, it is a huge eye opener.
Well, I start to think about what was important to me at approximately that age.
Yeah.
Our views are completely different, and what we feel as adults is important. It's like, it wasn't important back then, but clearly it's important to them right now. And
Mhm.
it affects their friendships and their connection and blah, 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 and belonging and all the things that we think is so minute. But to them, it's like, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Thanks, Susan. Sheree, I saw you were gonna say something.
and I try, like with my husband, to balance that, like how important is it to me versus how important is it to him, versus am I just letting go of this because I don't want to deal with it? Am I just avoiding? And then,
Mhm.
to use Lynn's phrase, then it's like I'm holding a beach ball underwater for months and months and months, and all these little things pile up. And then one day he walks in the door and he sneezes, and I lose my stuff because I'm just like so mad at him. And he looks at me and says, what? Because my arms are tired and the beach balls popped up.
That's
So I
right.
can't hold it anymore. So I have to like have a conversation with myself and go, okay, how important is it? And are you avoiding, or is this not a big deal to you? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Perfect. Makes perfect sense.
And it's
Other
vulnerable.
takeaways.
Sarah.
Two things. One, Jeff, when you were talking about how like you felt all this adrenaline, it just totally brought me back to this conflict that I had in high school. It might have been one of the first times that I really confronted a friend, and it was like I blacked out. It's not like that anymore. I can confront easily now. But I definitely think that it strengthens relationships. It does. And I think I had said that on the Facebook group that, you know, I was always leery of people that were like, oh, we've never had a fight and we're getting married. I'm like, ooh, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. And it makes sense now seeing this and how it plays out. You really do need to go through those steps. And they're just almost doing like it's almost like a spiritual bypass, right? But it's with this. Yeah.
Well said.
So yeah, it was interesting to see it in those steps. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for your share, Sarah. And thank you too, Sheree. Anyone else like to share takeaways
No,
or what stood out
I
for
have
you?
a friend who whenever I go to their house, okay, all right, there's always something that the husband would contradict her about. So I would later tell her, you stayed quiet. Why didn't you say something? It's such a waste of time. I have to waste so much energy, and then at the end of the day, we talk more about it, and there'll be more arguments. So it's just, isn't this what I've been doing over some time? And I'm happy about it, very happy about it. And he loves me for it. But I sometimes wonder, okay, why is she not answering him back? But I guess that's the way how we work with our past struggles. You know, we use behaviors that help us out.
Yeah.
And I think like any strategy, sometimes those behaviors are a great solution, and sometimes they're a tool for the moment, and a tool can become damaging over time, right? Yeah. Sometimes we outgrow them, or they outgrow us, or they stop working. Right?
Well, and this is something we work on in the Inner Balance program. The first 3 weeks are about your relationship with yourself. How do you get yourself in balance, find stability in yourself? And then week 4, we look at, okay, now how do you find that stability in a relationship? And so you'll look at a scenario that happened maybe earlier that day or the day before. Once you unpack and get clear with yourself and what you want for the relationship, now you go create balance in the relationship. You got to go back and clean up the scenario. Otherwise, we find balance within ourselves, but we just keep getting further and further away from our partner or the person that matters in that situation.
Yeah.
That friend.
Jeff, that's what the stability stage, when you think about, if you look at the book, she's saying the danger in stability is we get ourselves back in balance. Okay, I know you and you know me, and now we're just like 2 railway tracks, and we start drifting further and further apart. And that's how couples get to a place, and it's like 40 years of marriage and they go, I want a divorce. It's like, what? Well, it's just too much. Yeah.
That makes sense. Well said, Lynn.
Sorry, somebody else was.
No, I agree with what Farida said, her friend. The arguments or your friend staying quiet or whatever. Sometimes, again, it's not that important to her. Let them have their say in their thing. I have that situation many times where my husband will, you know, go on some tangent about something or whatever. And I just ask myself, how important is this to me to make my 2 bits heard? Because I know it will continue. That conversation will continue into the late evening, and I'd like to sleep.
Yes. Well, as we're wrapping up, I'd like to share with everybody, please ask questions in our Facebook group, or when we send out the emails, you can reply to those. We will always respond to you. So if you have questions or topics you'd like us to talk about, we'd love to hear what the topics are, what interests you, so we can dive into that. And as we're about to go, I'd like to remind everybody of this one little statement. The opposite of conflict is not harmony, it's apathy. And also, you'll get an email in a couple of days, which will have the link to this video, and it'll have a skill building worksheet that takes those questions and a few others. And so you can use it in any kind of scenarios where you're having some power struggle and you want to get clear and balanced within yourself, so you can go back and clean up the relationship or the situation. Thank you all for being on the call today. Wonderful. We love hearing you share and engage with us, and we love building this community. Thank you.
Please feel free
Thank
to
you.
share, because everyone's welcome. There's no prerequisite or anything for this. It's just really a place where we can learn together.
And in 2 weeks, we'll have another
Yes.
discussion, and we'll wait to hear what topic to be on that. We'll let you know on Thursday.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
bless.
Have a great
God
day.
bless.
God bless.
See you
Thank you.
soon.
Thank
Bless.
you.
I'm done, baby.
Bye, Sarah.